Good evening, everybody. Could you please take your seats? We're about to begin the show. My name is Ned Desmond. I'm the COO of TechCrunch. I'm very happy to welcome you this evening to a first ever for TechCrunch Disrupt. It's our first Apprentice show. This all began a couple of weeks ago when we wrote a blog post called Who Wants to Be George Zachary's Apprentice? As most of you know, George Zachary is a pretty accomplished venture capitalist. He's returned more than $1 billion in value to his limited partners. And so when you write a post like that, you get a lot of responses. We asked folks to provide their LinkedIn profile. We asked them to write a very brief essay describing the most formative moment in their life. And we asked them to make a brief video explaining why they would be a great venture capitalist. We got a lot of responses. Anybody who got picked from all of those responses could have easily gotten into Harvard. So, US News and World Report hasn't exactly validated the data, but I'll tell you it's true. What happened after that? George read all of these, he watched all the videos, he picked 7 folks. You'll see those 7 folks on stage this evening talking with George for a few minutes. In between each session, you'll have an opportunity to vote. We're going to get the audience choice here. You'll vote on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the top score, for how well you liked this candidate as a potential apprentice for George Zachary. The voting is in your chair. You can see it. You might be sitting on it. It's probably uncomfortable if you are. You can vote many times, but only your last vote counts. You'll have about 5 to 10 seconds to vote after the candidate comes off the dais, and then it'll close, and we'll show the results up here. Is there any questions? Okay, well, I hope you're going to enjoy our first ever Apprentice show. And just to get you all in the mood, there was one video that came in from one of the contestants, which if we gave awards for great videos, this would have gotten the blue ribbon. And I think it perfectly sets the stage for what this event is all about. So if we could roll that video, and then George will come up right afterwards. Thank you.
Excuse me, where are my manners? I was just doing some light quantum physics. Hi, my name is Tito Hamzy, and I would love to be Mr. Zachary's apprentice. I graduated from San Francisco State, and I've been working with many companies since I was 18. I follow the tech world closely through the many online blogs, such as TechCrunch, Engadget, Wired, and a variety of other publications. Solved it. But I also go beyond that, working closely with startups on creating media and learning about them as a company and how they work. At any one time, I'll be working on a variety of different projects, driving that entrepreneurial spirit. Hi-ya! Thought I could break that. I like people talking to me about ideas. If they have an idea, I always listen. If they have a good idea, I almost always help out.
Tiny jackets for crickets.
Bad idea.
A website dedicated to afros.
Great idea. I like challenges. I like taking chances. I like being different. Mr. Zachary, I would like to be your apprentice.
Thanks to Tito Hamzy there for a great video. Tito's going to come on. He's one of the candidates. He's one of the last candidates to come on. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. As most of you probably know, my name is George Zachary, and I'm a venture capitalist. That's my job. It's not something that I grew up wanting to be. I didn't want to become a venture capitalist. It just kind of came about in the right way. So I'm going to spend about 15 to 20 minutes talking about kind of my background, how I got into the business, what I do, what I look for, the great things about the business, the not fun things about the business, and kind of my outlook on the business. So let's kind of start. It's 1965. I was born. My parents are from Greece, a very small town in Greece called Mikrochorio, which means small town. And there's a total of 120 people there. It's not a very technically sophisticated area at all. Everyone is basically a farmer or a soldier based on what year it is. And that's the background I came from. I was a very grounded family. My dad and mom came to the United States in 1950. My dad was an electrician, worked in a light bulb factory. So, I didn't have a Mitt Romney background or a Paul Ryan background or anything like that. I thank my parents for kind of giving me the opportunity to get here. And so that's kind of my family background and roots. I was very interested in technology when I was pretty young. When I was 11 years old in 1976, I got the catalog for this company called Heath. And Heath Electronics made some very early kit computers, and I was fascinated by them back then. I think that's just the way my brain was wired. And I was super interested in it. My family ended up moving to Long Island. I grew up in Astoria, New York, which has a lot of Greek people there. And we moved to Long Island because my parents didn't want me to die in high school in New York City. And when I got there, one day walking home from school, I walked past the computer store, one of the first computer stores in the New York metropolitan area, started by a 39-year-old Polish immigrant named Andrzej Rozwadowski. And Andrzej saw me coming into the store every day, and he basically gave me a job unboxing and boxing computers, stuffing memory onto boards, putting boards onto them, loading operating system from floppy disk. And it was a great job. It beat pushing lawnmowers and delivering newspapers, which I had done. And that's, I think, Andrzej gave me my big break, and I always thank and believe in an immigrant like Andrzej who gave me that opportunity. Recently, I went back on a trip to Greece with my family. I stopped in and saw him, and he's now 72 years old. He was then, and he says, I'm the oldest Apple technician in the United States. So anyway, that's kind of how I got involved in technology. I did technology. I had a little software development company, writing code for some small customers in 1977 through 82, 83, until I went to MIT. I got accepted to go to MIT. I studied computer science there as an undergrad. I went to the business school as an undergrad, and I was surrounded by an incredible amount of smart people. When I got there, I realized there's a lot of incredibly smart people here, and they know how to write compilers better than I do. And I realized then that while I had tremendous interest in technology, I realized that I wanted to do something that was more leveraged, that I had interest in what products were and what you could do with them. And a bit of that started when I was in 10th grade. My friends and I hacked into our elementary school, junior high school mainframe, and we just used it to basically send messages to one another. And it was incredibly exciting that you could basically send a message to your friend on a remote terminal, remote being in the same school, and we just thought this was the coolest thing ever. And I actually, when I look back on it now, I think the roots of my investing in messaging were basically preceded by my excitement in that. So that was a natural extension of something I found particularly exciting. So anyway, I went to MIT. I was so happy to graduate from MIT. It was not a fun experience, a tremendous amount of very smart people, but I learned to work obsessively there, and I learned to be able to pull all-nighters, which I could still easily do. And I've done a lot of those in my career. And when I was at MIT, I realized that what technology really was the systematization of power. That's what technology is. You take power and you put it into hardware or software. You give people power. That's what people are really excited about, the power to live better, to contact other people, to be more effective. And that's why technology is so disruptive. It comes in this very simple package, which basically provides an incredible amount of capability for other people. It has been changing the world. 30 to 40 years ago, when I got involved in technology, 30 years ago, no one would have imagined the kind of technological landscape we have now, and that is basically the center of our societal functioning. No one would have ever imagined something like Facebook, ever, or Twitter. So that's how I kind of got started. When I was in my 20s, I worked at startups, started by friends of mine. A couple of them did incredibly well. We were acquired by public companies, and I put a little bit of money in my pocket doing that. I learned a lot. And one of the most important things I learned in a startup is that if you ask everyone in the company, what does the company do? If everyone gives you the same answer without brainwashing, that's a really good sign that there's a leader who's providing focus and clarity. And this is a repetitive theme that I've noticed, which is great leaders of startups, and don't confuse that with great managers. Great leaders can specify a vision with focus and clarity. If they do that, then it's easy for the people on the founding team and the rest of the organization to know what to build. It's easy to not go down blind paths. That's why the Steve Jobs model tends to work much better than the HP model does now. So that's one of the things I learned from these companies. There was another company I was involved with which was tremendously exciting. We coined the term virtual reality. This is 1989. The company was started by someone named Jaron Lanier. And Jaron was a Six Sigma intelligence person. Six Sigma is maybe a little bit too far. But he was incredibly smart. But if you asked everyone in the company, what does the company do, they would give you very different answers. We had lots of very smart people from MIT Media Lab at that point. But there was strong vision, but people couldn't materialize it into what the product strategy was. So those were some early experiences. The VPL experience was incredibly exciting, but unfortunately I went broke in the process. I had to go on unemployment. I had no money at all. I was in debt. It was not a high period in my life. And I decided that I had to do something to kind of rebuild myself. It was psychologically very difficult to feel that I had failed. I'd never really failed in life in some kind of work or educational way other than being bombarded at MIT. I'd never really failed in any way, and it was a tough lesson to absorb. But one of the lessons I absorbed is once you get shot down, you must immediately get back up and keep going. I lost all my money in that VPL saga. I got recruited by a company called Silicon Graphics, which was a very high-flying, very exciting company. And I started and ran the group that did the Nintendo 64 project there. We designed and built the entire Nintendo 64 for Nintendo. And I had the luxury of having a great mentor, someone named Wei Yen. And Wei came to the US with $300. His parents, who were Western-trained doctors, were executed in China for being Western-trained and not being communists. And I learned a ton from Wei. Wei was regarded as a Darth Vader-like character at Silicon Graphics. He wasn't a happy, smiley guy. At Silicon Graphics, we had too much happy, smiley, and not enough focused on, like, what does this mean? What is the importance of this? And I learned a ton working with Wei. And that's when I learned that having a great mentor could make a big difference in my career. Wei very much affected my career. And I really respected the fact that he was self-made. That's an important thing for me. And he grew with very little opportunity other than his intelligence and an incredible amount of drive. And in terms of fighting against communists, it's something I believe in. My dad fought in the Greek Civil War against communists, and he was backed by the CIA on the Greek Special Forces. And I asked my dad, what is Greek Special Forces? What did that mean? He says, basically, we had bullets, and if you weren't in the Special Forces, you had rocks. So Greece has not changed much in some very important ways since then. So anyway, I've always been very focused on how do you empower the individual? How do you basically not let authoritarian systems like communism, like defective forms of government, like systems that basically breed fear and use fear as methods to control all of us in this room, how do we get past that? How do we empower the individual? So I always really resonated with the story of Apple. Apple was the computer I first hacked on and used, and there's a lot to love about the person who was Steve Jobs. I also have had friends who've worked directly for him, so I know that the story and the reality are not necessarily the same. But the essence of him is the same, and that thing is you must follow what you are excited about, follow your intuition, follow your heart, and live it with an incredible obsessiveness. And that's an important thing coming up. I mean, it's been approximately 342 days, I believe, since Steve Jobs passed away, and we shouldn't lose that lesson. So, long story short, we finished the Nintendo 64 in December '95, and I got a chance to work with Miyamoto, who built all the early games, Donkey Kong, Zelda, and I was asking Miyamoto, like, where did you get the ideas and interest to build these games? Miyamoto had never been a game designer before, and he looked at me and he said, it's really simple. And I said, what is it? And he said, do you remember when you were a kid growing up in New York? And I said, yeah. And he said, how did you make games? And I said, well, we made like buildings into bases and stairs into like walls and escape areas. He goes, that's what I do. He goes, I just create an environment and I run around it and I make a game. And then that reminded me how important it is to follow your curiosity and your intuition. And I find that almost all great founders follow that. So coming out of that, I was asked to be an entrepreneur in residence at a venture firm to build a multiplayer video game company. And working through that, I discovered I really don't think I want to build or start a company, and I couldn't rationalize exactly why. I figured out that the multiplayer video game network was not technically feasible because the latency on the internet back then, 1995, was about 100 milliseconds. The average kind of connection was about 256 kilobits per second. It was mostly ISDN. There was almost no one with broadband anything. People didn't believe cable modems could work. They were theoretical at that point. So that's how I got to a venture firm. I didn't look for a venture job. I wasn't a person saying, I can't wait to become a venture capitalist. So this firm asked me to be an entrepreneur in residence. And I said no, because I didn't want to do that. And they said, well, look, you pursued this idea and you came to a very rational answer about why you wouldn't do this. And most founders wouldn't do that. They would just follow what they're excited about. And I said, wow, they're right. And they said, did you ever think about being a venture capitalist? And I said, well, I don't golf. I don't play tennis. I'm not a Republican. I actually don't usually vote. I wear jeans. I shave about twice a week. And what do you do? Like, what would be exciting about this? And I spent 6 months with them looking at companies, and I discovered that there's something incredibly exciting about it. The exciting part was meeting people who were founders, people who wanted to change the world, people who wanted to become incredibly wealthy as well. I mean, do not leave that part of the equation. Greed is an incredibly motivating factor in the human spirit. But a lot of us are people who have incredible desires to change the world, and these desires to change the world usually come from some early factors in their childhood. What I've discovered is that some of the most powerful entrepreneurs have a deep passion and fire that comes from having somewhat of a broken household. They learn how to manage chaos when they're young. They might have one parent who's really strong. They might have one parent who's very volatile or missing. And through that combination, they discover that they like feeling safe and they like mastering chaos. Just like all of you, or some of you in this room, are thinking about those experiences right now. These people live on those experiences. They live in their subconscious. It's exactly why when founders are asked, why don't they stop doing this for the money? They said, well, I'm not doing this for the money. They're not. They're doing this to show the world that they can do something that gets them enough attention to show that they are really important. That's an incredibly important psychological factor. Founders who aren't interested in attention of some type are probably not usually going to be successful. They'd have to learn how to create attention and demand attention, drive attention, and control attention. Founders, great founders have that ability to do that. And I've had the opportunity to work with some great founders. I'm one of the original investors in Twitter, so I got a chance to meet and work with Jack Dorsey and Evan Williams. They're very different guys than the rest of the founders I've worked with. They're more lackadaisical, but they're very smart, but they don't have the same obsessiveness. For example, my partners and I backed Elon Musk in 1996. And I knew when I met Elon that this was a person who was not going to be stopped. And Elon and I became friends, and I noticed in him is he had a burning desire to change the world. He had a burning desire to do things that were impossible. He wasn't interested in making a better version of games. He wasn't interested in making a better Zynga. He sees no utility in that. What Elon saw value in was basically saving humanity that the world might destroy itself. So after Elon almost died, he and I met for coffee, and I asked him, I'm like, okay, so like it's great you're alive. I'm like, what are you going to do from here on? He goes like, I'm thinking about space. And I said, space? Like, what do you mean space? He goes, do you think it's crazy if I send mice to Mars? And I said, well, do they come back? And he said, no. And I said, I think people think that's crazy. But then I asked him, why are you doing this? And what he said is, humanity, someone on this planet is going to destroy the planet. It's a tragedy of the commons. And he had so much intensity when I talked about this that I knew that he had no help, there was no way to stop him from not doing that. So he pursued it, and to everyone's amazement, you know, Elon Musk is basically the fourth major entity to launch a rocket into space. I mean, he's one of us, and that's an amazing accomplishment. So I look for founders that have unique views on problems that are usually extensions of their personality. If you meet Evan and Jack, they tend to avoid confrontation. Twitter is a great system for avoiding confrontation with people. So that's why they created. These products are extensions of their own personalities. These are not people who look up the IDC market research report and say, oh, IDC says there's a market for people that want to travel on rockets. These people do not think this way. Great founders have visions, and they are motivated by those visions. And as some people have said, the difference between vision and hallucination is how many people follow you. And they keep going. So I look for great founders like that. Now, what do I do as a venture capitalist? My job as a venture capitalist is twofold. One is to return an investment made by our limited partners, who are 50 institutions, through basically creating returns in the companies. So that basically works for everyone's stomachs, if I'll put it that way. Greed feeds stomachs. It also feeds some psychological factors. But the other part of it is where you get a chance to back people who want to change the world. And that is incredibly exciting. It's what motivates all of us to basically get up and go to work. It's what motivates people to feel like, I want to feel a purpose in life. Everyone wants to feel a purpose in life, that there's some meaning. So what I look for is founders who are seeking that. And the good news is, I actually have not had some kind of intellectual 64,000 variable system for investing in these companies. My system has been to follow my intuition, and I was trained to do that by my previous successes and failures. I use my brain as a rationalization system. I don't use it to make investments. That does not mean that following your intuition leads to success every time. There is no deterministic system. But what I discovered is that the best and most deterministic system for me is to follow my intuition about people. So what I look to do is I look to back people who are pursuing a vision, in that order. And because it's that order, I automatically have a founder-friendly kind of personality and strategy and behaviors. It shows in my references. That's what I believe. There's other people in my business who are focused purely on the money, purely. And that's the spectrum of behavior in the venture business. There's people completely driven by greed, and there's people completely driven by change of the world. And they're both aspects of the same thing, which is if you want to continue to do this job, you have to create returns. One of my mentors in the business, who's been in it for 40 years, I asked him when I first started working in venture in '95, I said, how will I know if I'm successful doing this? I was really nervous because my brain was telling me to not do this because I had no experience doing it. And he says it comes down to 3 letters. And I was thinking, uh-oh, like I hope he's not going to say something involving sex. And he says it's IRR, and internal rate of return. And he says, if you have IRR, the limited partners do not care how you did it. If you don't have it, no one cares what cool company you invested in. So the tension of the business are finding exciting companies that can change the world as well as drive huge returns. And if you look at the business now, it's a bipolar market, meaning there's a tremendous amount of companies losing money. Tremendous. There's a few amount of winners that drive all the returns. This is very different than the previous history of venture capital when the distribution of returns was much more Gaussian. There weren't companies that were going public worth $10 billion in the mid-90s. That just was not a reality. Even though lots of people like to talk about the failure of the Facebook IPO, it was not a failure. It was an incredible success for Facebook, other than affecting the morale of the company. So that's a little bit about venture. What do I do every day? I meet startups. I look at startups. I talk to founders. I also look to network with companies that can help them. I've been doing this now for 17 years, and I've met or talked with or emailed with or interfaced, that's kind of a geeky word to use, but it's the truth, with about 20,000 companies. And I've seed funded about 30 of them, but major investments I've made, probably about 35 companies. Of those 35 companies, about $150 million went into those 35 companies. And the good news is that either through intuition or luck or some combination, I've managed to produce about $1 billion of investor gains, which is pretty good. So I feel good about it. It's taken me 7 years to admit to myself that it's pretty good. And I look back on it, I look at some of the great founders. The last great founder that I backed with a big return was David Sachs, who founded Yammer. I met David through Elon. And what I've noticed is that a lot of the people that I meet through people networks. It's not necessarily directly through email. Elon told me when eBay was acquiring PayPal, he says, David Sachs was the smartest person at PayPal, and he made this company successful. You should really meet him. When Elon tells me something like that, I take it pretty seriously. So I backed David. He built a company called Genie, which we wanted to be the family social network. We were obliterated by Facebook because Facebook took over that functionality. There was a point when no one thought that Facebook would get into the old person's market like me and grandmothers and grandfathers. But Facebook ate it through photo sharing. So what I learned through David is that an incredibly obsessive product person like David, with a brilliant mind who's a strategist, can create from nothing to something huge. The company was acquired for $1.2 billion by Microsoft in June. And it was an incredibly rewarding experience, literally. And the main reason why is Dave and I have been friends for 10 years. We were friends before we were business partners. It's an incredible feeling to back a friend of yours and see them go from being not well known in PayPal, even though David was the CEO, to basically being the star of the show and making it incredibly successful. And that's one of the most rewarding things about this job on an emotional level. You get to see people feel successful at an amazing point. You also get to see their very low points too. And you also get to make a good amount of money in the process. So that's kind of a big overview. Now I think it's time to meet some of the candidates. So we had about 125 to 150 applicants. We looked through them. I paid a lot of attention to the quality of the video. I noticed that a bunch of the LinkedIn resumes were very strong, but the people didn't show well on video. And there's three major components of this job. Number one, you have to have incredible critical thinking skills. You have to be very smart. You have to understand, can this business become a monopoly? Not can it become a commodity? I'm not interested in backing companies that create commodities. I'm interested in backing companies that can become monopolies. Why? Because those are the companies that have durable margins, and those are the companies that create huge amounts of cash flow. So I was looking at the videos because I need the person who we're going to find as the apprentice has to have the ability to attract founders who have that kind of strategic take over the world personality and take over the world intelligence. So critical thinking is very important. The other part of it that's very important is a social intelligence, being able to read a room like this or the entire conference of Disrupt and knowing how to effectively and efficiently use your time and energy to go meet the founders who are the most interesting and most powerful founders. Not the founders who have something kind of cool and widgety and will create a $10 million company. No, the economics of venture capital require that you return and create billion-dollar companies. So having that social intelligence is very important. The third important part, which is absolutely critical, is emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. When you back that person, you realize you are backing them, that you are not the star of the show. If you want to be the star of the show, you should not work for me. This is about the most star of the show that I get, and I don't want any more of it. The people who are the stars in reality are the founders. They're the ones who create the innovation. The capital does not create the innovation. I fund revolutionaries. I'm looking for someone to fund these revolutionaries. So now it's time to meet some of these great candidates now they've talked about what I'm looking for. So we'll start with the first person. I actually don't have a list here, but we'll call them up. Does that give everyone a pretty good sense of what I'm looking for in the background? Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah.
Salmon Razak.
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce Salmon Razak up. Salmon? Oh, you're not mic'd up? Okay, why don't we start with Cameron Saraf?
Pleasure to meet you.
Great to meet you. So Cameron, maybe you could take a minute, 30 seconds to a minute to tell everyone who you are and why you applied.
Sure. So I'm Cameron Sapa. I actually started out in the business world. I helped start some small organizations and worked for some VC and consulting companies like McKinsey. And I observed in my work there that when I worked with the partners that was the most successful, they really had deep domain expertise in a certain area. And so since I was really interested in healthcare, I felt like I had to become a healthcare practitioner in order to be an expert. So I actually became a clinical psychologist. My specialty is in behavioral medicine. And working in various hospitals, I really saw the potential for technology to disrupt medicine. Like I can treat patients that are thousands of miles away through video conferencing. And so I really wanted to be part of that revolution. And so now what I do is I provide clinical and scientific consulting to health technology startups.
That's great. So what's attractive to becoming a venture capitalist to you? I mean, why spend your life doing this? Right now you're helping people through being
Absolutely.
a doctor. Why do this?
Well, my purpose in life really is to to create the tools and the infrastructure to enhance well-being and encourage human flourishing. Now, traditionally, you can do that in two ways. So on the micro level, you can work in a service industry like being a doctor and treating patients directly. Now, on a little bit more of a macro level, like I've worked as a researcher in creating treatments and publishing articles that eventually get disseminated to the front lines. But what I think is really cool is now technology has provided an opportunity for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to create whole new delivery systems like telemedicine, like mobile apps that can work at the very, very highest level. So I think venture capital for me is an opportunity to do what I've been doing, but to do it on a much more massive scale.
Got it. And what kinds of companies are interesting and exciting to you? I mean, there's tens of thousands of companies that approach investors every year. Like, which ones do you want to spend time with? Which ones are exciting for you?
Absolutely. Well, personally for me, it's companies like Yammer, Twitter, Imperium, Playdom, LearnBoost, Wanderfly. I'm just kidding. Other than the ones that are in your portfolio, I would say the three sectors that are really I'm bullish on are the digital health market. Obviously, I think there's a huge potential for them to return medicine to what medicine should be, which is preventative and patient-driven. Second, I think B2B companies that are specifically targeting startups. There's an expression that in a gold rush you can either go mining or you can sell pickaxes. So I think companies that are really providing the software, the servers, and the support to create great startups are really going to have the best longevity. And the third thing that I'm really interested in is what I call smart social networking. So unlike the first generation of social networking that was a little bit narcissistic and focusing so much on status updates, I think companies like Quora that are using crowdsourcing to impart real knowledge, like how can I cope with chronic disease or how can I find a good mechanic, I think those are really the three sectors that I think are particularly hot.
Got it. And what would be your strategy to get in front of kind of the best founders? What would you do?
Well, I think it definitely relies on social networking. So that's tapping into my own networks that I've developed. It's coming to conferences like here where I've been able to meet fantastic companies and using both of those avenues. I think when it comes down to it, venture capital is a people business. And so I think when you have companies, just like the story that you shared about, David Sachs, is a great way to vouch for people. And so that's the kind of the approach that I would take.
And how are you going to compete against, I find that the top 20 or 30 startups that investors are trying to break down the doors to get in. We're not at the luxury of sitting back and our capital being requested.
Absolutely.
So how are you going to beat, to use someone who's high profile, how are you going to beat a Mark Andreessen?
That's a great question. Well, obviously, companies are looking for money. And so what I think you can do is really, it's the extra value added that you can provide. So the mentorship that you provide as a venture capital, whether that's from your previous experience as an entrepreneur or the experience that you have in attracting talent, motivating employees, and mediating disputes, I think if you have that kind of people skills and can provide that extra added value, I think that's what's going to attract great entrepreneurs to you as opposed to anyone else providing the same amount of money.
Got it. So my final question is, can you just briefly talk about one of the most difficult decisions you've had to make in your life with relatively little information and how you made the decision?
Well, I would say for me is whether to continue in clinical practice. But the decision that I came to was actually through consulting with a startup that provides telemedicine. And I realized I can treat 30 patients a week maximum, and that's the impact that I can make. But the technology that they're providing helps provide treatment to millions of people. And so that's what really got me interested in getting involved in the startup and VC world, because I can make such much more of a bigger impact, even though I love working with people.
Got it. That's great. Okay, so now I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but we're all now I'm asking you to kind of be involved and actually vote on whether you think Cameron would be a great person to be an investor and we could work together as a apprentice mentor. So there's the little voting things that are on your seats. So if you could pick up and start voting, that would be great. 5 is the top score. So please vote. putting you on the spot here.
No worries.
Jeopardy never goes away. I feel like we need some animated graphic or something. Okay, we're about to have a graphic. And here's your score distribution, Cameron. You can see it here as well. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Well, anyway, I just want to thank Cameron. Thanks for coming on stage, and thank you for applying.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now that we're starting to get the routine going here a little bit, the next person I'm going to invite up is Dhruv Gupta. Dhruv? Great to have you. So you're a very experienced executive. Maybe you could tell everyone a little bit about your background, what you're doing now, why you want to do this.
Sure. I work today at Oracle, though I hope no one from Oracle is listening to this, but I run products at Oracle. I've been in the software business
I'm not sure if everyone could hear you because your mic, you might want to hold it a little closer to you.
Good. Okay. My name is Dhruv Gupta. I've been in the startup industry for the better half of my life, professional career. Out of school, I was the first person to be hired in DE Shaw, India, when they were setting up a center in India. I did that. I came to Berkeley to do my graduate degree. And after that, I've been in a series of startups, one after the other. 3 people, founding engineer, 40 people. And now I find myself at Oracle because they acquired the last company I was at.
Which company was that?
It was called Ambu Point, and our focus was enterprise infrastructure and application management, to be specific.
And you run product management there?
I was in product management, product marketing. I have a hybrid role. I started out as an engineer writing code. I, at some point in time, realized that I'm not going to be a CTO. I'm not going to be the best guy at writing code. Writing and optimizing an algorithm wasn't fun. I was always more interested in the conference room behind my cubicle where the business discussions were going on. So I'd go bug my CEO, say, what's going on? What's the next customer? Who's competing? What's the deal? Why is it not closing? What can I do? And I realized that really I wanted to be in the product side of the house, product and product marketing. So at Ambu Point, I started out as a product manager and eventually ended up being the vice president of product marketing and product management.
Got it.
So
I was going to ask, so you're a products person. What's the difference between a great product and an okay product? How do you know?
A great product cuts through a lot of the crap, addresses focal points.
Please feel free to use an example.
A great product is the Apple iPhone. It changed the world in certain ways. It does very minimal things, but it does it really, really well. It's not like, I'm sorry to say, the Android ecosystem, which does a lot of things, but I really don't like using it.
You know, my wife describes me that way. I do minimal things, but I do them very well.
So from my perspective, a great product does those things, does a few things, does them really well. And that's really my philosophy. I look for solving problems. And you can change the world by solving problems one step at a time. And if you build a product and if you're solving someone's pain point, whether that's a consumer or an enterprise IT data center person, you're helping him. You're not changing the world. You may not be solving cancer, but you're changing his life in certain ways. And if as a product person, you believe you're changing someone's life, you are building great products.
Okay, so let's take a kind of a quick case study. There's a very interesting company. This is actually modeled off a true scenario. I don't want to name the company, but some very interesting co-founders, and they have, let's say there's 2 of them, and they have 2 very directions of how they want to drive the company. They hate talking to each other, but they're appealing to you to fire each other person. And while you're watching this, the cash of the company is going to 0. People want to bail from the company. What do you do?
I bring them together in a room and tell them, look, no matter what you do, you have the same dollar value for the shares that you hold. If you don't work together, you will end up with nothing. There's no point fighting. If that doesn't work, you find someone else.
And if one of them basically says, I think I should be the CEO and you should fire the other guy sitting across the table from me, how do you react to that? This is a true scenario.
I listen to him, I listen to both sides of the story and then make a decision. There is no point reacting because for every story there are 2 sides of the coin. You have to listen, you have to empathize. There must be something driving that passion or concern. You basically have to sit back and listen.
And what's your process for, let's suppose both of them are saying either that person goes or I'm going. It happens more than you think. Unfortunately, this happens to me about once every year or 2. How do you decide who to back? in that situation? So someone's definitely leaving. A divorce is happening. Who are you going to back?
I'm going to back the guy who I feel is more important for the company to survive, who owns the critical essence for the future vision of the company. That's the person who needs to survive because he's going to take the company forward, not someone who's probably playing a side role here.
Great. Thank you, Drew. That was great. So now it's time for voting.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. So again, once again, vote 1 to 5. And I really appreciate you doing this. It's good for me to get the feedback, good for Drew to get the feedback.
Sure.
And it's probably, I hope it's a fun thing for everyone to be doing. And we get the Jeopardy music again. Thank you, music supplier. I feel like I need to say something important while the music is going on, but I have nothing to say that's important. Okay. Okay, Drew. It was a little bit underwhelming to the audience.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed talking to you, and you're an incredibly smart guy. I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so kind of just to check in, how does everyone feel this is going in terms of format and processes? Do people like it this way? Okay, that's good. Thank you. All right, the next person is Phillip Nisenzun. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Phillip, well, coming up here.
It's Phillip.
Phillip?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Wow, total goof on my part. I said Philippe. So Phillip, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to do this? What's so great about you?
Sure. So right now I'm working at eBay. I'm in the corporate strategy team.
I'm not sure if everyone can hear you. You need to speak louder.
Is that better? Okay. Okay. So I'm currently.
No.
Hold it up. Okay. So I'm currently at eBay on the corporate strategy team. It's a small group in the corporate center, and we work on long-term growth initiatives. So basically, what should eBay be doing that's cool over the next few years? As part of that, we do a lot of outreach to startups, partially to get a sense of what are the trends that are emerging. As you know, startups are responsible for a lot of innovation, and also to see where we can partner with them, work together, kind of develop solutions together. So I find that very exciting, but we usually kind of stop at the phase of talking to them about the idea. You don't quite feel empowered to invest in them all the time, because eBay is not really set up as a venture firm, and so you can't always help bring their idea to fruition. So that's sort of been my motivation to applying for this.
And what in your background will make you great to do this?
Sure. So there's a couple things. So I've had, I think, good exposure to the consumer technology space, particularly consumer internet. So through eBay, through some early startup work in my career. I've also had, I think, fairly broad business experience. So I have a number of years in consulting where I worked in various industries, in various geographic markets. I think I got a good sense for how business works overall, and I'm able to have sort of a high-level, long-term perspective. And then, of course, there's some certain personality traits which are a little hard to vouch for yourself, but I think I would have sort of patience, loyalty, ability to build rapport, be a good listener, those kind of characteristics.
Got it. What do you think is the most exciting startup right now?
From the ones I've seen, it's one called Senseg. So they do.
Well, can you say it?
Sure, it's Senseg, S-E-N-S-E-G. I think it's Finnish, actually, out of Helsinki.
And can you tell everyone why you think it's exciting?
Sure. So they do basically tactile technology for surfaces. So let's say you've got an iPad. You could brush your hand along the screen, and you would get a tactile sensation. So you could feel like a smooth surface or a wet surface, something like that. And this can actually be applied to any surface, even though the tablet's the most natural use case. They're building out a full supply chain. So they're manufacturing it, building an SDK so that developers can integrate it. So it can be applied to something like a car screen, light switch, anything that you can think of.
Okay, so let's talk a little kind of case study where I don't name any of the specifics. Let's suppose there's a company, let's take this company.
Sure.
Where they've got a great product, it's like a super cool product. It's like amazingly cool functionality, but they have no idea what market to apply to. How do you figure out what to do? I mean, a big problem for startups are technology in search of a market. How do you figure out what's a product as opposed to technology? What's the input you give the founders about how to channel their behavior and how to build a business as opposed to just a piece of tech?
Yeah, good question. So I think you can start with just some basic brainstorming. So if you've got the technology, you can think about where it could apply. various industries, companies that they come naturally to them. Then you can, I think you can do a couple things. You either reach out to those companies to see if this would be something they were interested in. If it's more of a consumer product, perhaps you run some surveys, focus groups, that kind of thing. So you just do research to get a sense of how it could be applied. It can be a little bit tricky because sometimes you have to convince customers that they need a product before it's fully developed. But that's kind of a call you have to make as the entrepreneur.
Okay. What else is I going to ask you? What's your way of standing out in a crowd where, you know, there's going to be a whole bunch of alpha personalities all wanting to get to a great founder? What are you going to do to get in front of that founder? And you know, these days we're living virtually, so in front is like the hard thing to do. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so I think my way to stand out would be know something about them that they wouldn't expect. Either past experiences, past success, whatever it is. Mention something that would be significant for them and try to build rapport one-on-one. So basically try to draw attention to them rather than drawing it to myself.
Got it. Okay, thank you. It's time to vote again, so appreciate everyone voting. And Philip, I'm sorry I screwed up the
No
pronunciation
problem
of
at all.
your
It's
name.
very hard to hear.
It's not that hard, I just didn't do a good job on it. Okay, music is almost over, which means the voting is almost over. Most people voted, looks like it. Okay. Well, Philip, it was an okay score. It wasn't great, but I want to thank you for coming up here, and I want to thank you for applying. It was great to meet you. Thank you. Okay, next up is Greg Greiner. Greg? So, you know, I know you're involved with Stanford. Maybe you could tell everyone what you're doing right now. I'm involved in the Stanford StartX Incubator Accelerator from the beginning. You've had some association with them, so maybe you could tell the entire audience a little bit about you right now.
So yeah, I'm probably the youngest one here. I'm a junior at Stanford, majoring in management science and engineering, and also—
So youngest, you are 20?
20, yeah.
20? There's one person younger than you who is sitting right there who's just turned 17.
I'm saying of the, maybe of the candidates.
Of candidates, okay.
And I'm also hoping to major or minor in CS as well. And I founded a startup in high school that has been pretty successful.
Can you tell us about that?
So it's an e-commerce startup called Bob's Watches. We saw a hole in an industry that's pretty old, which is the Rolex watch industry, and we took advantage of it and kind of brought it online into the internet age, and that was a great experience, and I learned a lot through that.
So when you say brought it into the internet age, what does that mean exactly?
So the people who are in the industry right now are generally older people. They're traditionalists. They're still working out of their shops. Most of them are in the LA Diamond District, actually. And what we did is we brought a lot of transparency to it. We brought it online. We buy and sell watches. So we showed how much we buy for and how much we sell for, which was kind of a big deal in the industry and made us a lot of enemies with fellow dealers, but it made us a lot of friends with our customers.
Got it. And you know, why don't you want to be a founder? Why do you want to be an investor instead? It's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, so this all came from basically my experience at StartX, being able to interact with all those different founders, being a part of that larger community, being able to see all these people who have such great passion and are doing such amazing things that change the world. In a startup, you do get to do that personally, but you're not tapped into that community. And I really want to be tapped into that community, and I want to be part of all this change. And also, one of my main goals in life is, of course, to leave my mark on the world. And I feel like venture capital is the best way to get a real breadth of changing the world.
Got it. And you know, like as an investor, the thing I had to come to terms with is you don't really leave a mark. I remember that being a dream of mine when I was 20. You can empower other people to leave marks. Yeah. So are you going to be comfortable with giving up that limelight to founders? Because they're who should be getting the credit. Is that going to be okay? I don't think
for me, it's not about personal limelight. It's about like being a part of that change. and having a role to play in that change. And if I know that myself, that I was a part of that change, it doesn't really matter or if I'm in the media or the news as the person who brought it about specifically.
So you're younger than most people that get into venture capital. And one of the things I found, I got in when I was 30 after Nintendo 64 project, and I was 30 then, and it was still kind of difficult. A lot of times founders want to feel like they're looking up to someone, that they're not taking input from someone who has less experience than them, because it makes them feel impotent, I guess is a good way of putting it. What are you going to do to support those founders or get in front of those founders so they feel that they can trust you and that you can be a good partner to them?
I think a unique way that I can do that, because I'm so young, is act as their peer and not necessarily act as an older advisor. I can't gain their respect purely on experience and stuff like that, because I'm not old enough, so I don't have that experience. But I think if I come at it more as a peer and give them my advice as a peer, I think that could be a good way of doing that.
What do you think is the most exciting startup or technology company out there for you right now that you love what they do?
So I really like, especially with my experience with the Rolex company, people disrupting old industries. And so a company that was here at Disrupt, Your Mechanic, really excites me, because they're disrupting a really old industry that has not really been advanced in a really long time, and they're doing something that I think is really interesting.
Cool, and what do you think is interesting about that business? Why is that going to be a valuable business?
Because it's making something that is so frustrating and it's so necessary for everyone has cars. It's making it a lot easier, and it's making it cheaper, and it's bringing transparency to it, which is what I think we did with the Rolex company. It's bringing transparency to the industry where, how do I know if my car, if I'm getting a fair deal with my mechanic? And that's a way of kind of democratizing and making it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, it's time for voting. I'm going to keep the show going here. Time to vote on Greg. 1 to 5, 5 being the top score. Will the Jeopardy music persist into many centuries as the music of choice for breaks? It's a good question. Okay, here we go. Well, that's pretty good. I want to thank Greg for being here and for applying, and I think you've got a ton of potential. Thanks. Great to meet you. Okay, next up is Salmon. You're all mic'd up right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone welcome Salmon Razak.
Hi.
That's the right pronunciation, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So what motivated you to apply for this?
Sure. So right now, I graduated from Stanford last year, 2011, so pretty recent. And right now, since then, I worked at Genentech, doing mostly research. My background's in scientific research, and now I'm at a consulting company. And for me, I've always been interested in the startup world. Part of the reason why I stayed in this area is because the Bay Area is just the center of all this innovation. And for me, being in venture capital is a way for me to be at the hub of it all. You get to meet some of the most exciting founders, some of the smartest people in the area. They're using their passion. Their passion is basically to create some sort of change in the world, and that's something that I was really drawn to.
And so can you tell everyone about what's so great in your background that you'll be able to use to basically make yourself into a great investor?
Sure. So, in bench research is a lot like, going into startups. You have a vision. In this case, in my case, it was discovering a protein and using that as a target for cancer. You have to think about it the same way. This is like the one thing that's the singular focus of your life. That was my undergrad thesis. And
your undergrad thesis was on this protein for
exactly,
helping with cancer.
Helping people with cancer, and we helped develop a peptide vaccine that sort of targets that cancer. And why I think that's a good thing as an investor is I've been on that side where you spend hours and hours up late at night putting your life's work into something that you hope will leave some sort of impact. And I think as an investor, it's important to be able to step into the person's shoes, to understand what makes them tick, and ultimately that's something that I think is really valuable.
Got it. And what's the most exciting tech startup that you think about and you think, wow, that's such a cool product, I wish I was involved in some way?
Sure. I think Venmo, which recently got acquired by, I think, Braintree or Brainchild, I think it's called. What Venmo is basically allowing users to send mobile payments to each other. You know, if you're ever at a restaurant and someone owes you $20, they don't have it, you can pull out Venmo and send it to them. I think it's really exciting because it sort of disrupts the whole. PayPal was designed for desktop payments. There hasn't been really a good mobile payment. Unlike Square uses a credit card, this is linking to your bank account.
Yes.
That's something pretty exciting, I think.
And about you, what makes you feel so confident about your own ability that you could do a great job doing this? Because the venture job is usually the last stop on the train.
Exactly.
I mean, when I got in this business in 1995, there was about 40 or 50 people in my quote-unquote class that entered, and about 5 of us are still left. The rest got bounced out, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. So what's going to make you one of the winners and survivors?
I mean, I think my experience in research has taught me you always have to bounce back. You're going to fail. That's just the nature of life. You're going to fail. It's not about failing. It's about getting right back up. And I've always done that. And also, given my youth and a lot of my social networks at Stanford, I think I can tap into that and be able to see what the founders' visions are, step into their shoes, and I guess add value in that way. Understanding what their vision is and how I can help them achieve that vision.
Got it. Okay. At this point, we're going to ask for some voting. So vote 1 to 5. Yes, different music. The Jeopardy tune? Okay. Okay. Well, Salmon, it was great to meet you, and I'm sure our paths will meet up again. Thank you. All right, happy to call up Sean Conway.
What's up, George?
Sean?
Let's go.
Woo, little feedback there. So we've met before because Sean is the founder of NodeHall that was acquired by Chegg.
Correct.
And Sean applied to the program without really letting me know, which I really liked. You kind of just applied on your own strengths.
Right.
So maybe you could tell everyone in the audience a little bit about yourself, some of your history as a founder and other things you've done that are interesting.
Okay. Well, from a very, very young age, 16, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, quite the opposite of you. And I started NodeHall right out of college, 23. I was living on $500 a month. It was really, really tough. We were scrounging every month, but ended up getting users, and after 18 months, we're cash flow positive. Ended up raising around and ended up growing it to about 400,000 users and selling to Chegg like 14 months ago.
So you've been a great founder. So why become an investor? I mean, you could go off and found some more great companies. Why?
Right. So no, this is something I had to contemplate for quite a while. And what I found is, I think I can enable a lot more people like myself, and go ahead and giving them money, giving them funding, kind of understanding where their visions are, so they can go ahead and conquer the world, disrupt the industries that need disrupting, and I think I can do a better job as a venture capitalist than as an entrepreneur.
So you'll be okay, basically, being in the supporting role versus the lead role.
Yeah, I've done the whole limelight thing. Felt good, but at the same time, I like seeing things explode. I like seeing things, like just things getting done. And
And in your experience raising money and having investors, what did you look for in investors? I mean, what was useful and interesting for you? Because I'm sure you'll probably act that way.
So after I took a meeting, I always thought, could I sit down and have grab a beer with the guy? Could I actually sit down and just shoot the shit with him? And you really do get into bed with someone when you take money from them. So that's what I always look for, and it always steered me the right way.
Got it. So I'm going to ask the same question I've asked a lot of people, which is, there's a lot of very intelligent, aggressive people in this industry that are all trying to hustle each other. I've got one of my portfolio companies now that some of the top venture people are fighting for to get in. It's amusing to watch because I'm not involved in the fight because I'm already an investor. But these are very smart, capable people with great track records. And what are you going to do to get yourself into that fight before the fight starts?
Right, yeah, so I think you have to build a great reputation. I was thinking like a great reputation in this industry, beats out a few points on the pre-money any day. And so going ahead and making sure that you're creating relationships with these entrepreneurs, and maybe they aren't the ones you want in your portfolio, but they're going to go ahead out there, they're foot soldiers, they're going to go ahead and talk, CRV up in this case, and going to be the ones that really rep you and introduce you to great entrepreneurs. So you're the first one in line before they go ahead and start talking to other investors. So that's how I would go ahead and get feet on the street and get them talking to you before they start talking to the other venture capitalists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to keep things moving along here because I don't want to drag it out because it's getting a little bit later.
Absolutely.
So time for voting. 1 to 5
Be nice,
on
guys.
Mr. Sean Conway.
Yeah. They're brutal.
I'm not brutal. Music's changed, something lower. Whoa! That's pretty good. Sean, we will talk more. I know that. Okay, that was fun to get some nice, great scores from the audience. It seemed like something about Sean's, my guess is Sean's personality, people felt an authenticity to it. That's kind of what I got. And kind of grounded but aggressive nature. I kind of like that. And I think probably people will pick that up. My pleasure to bring up Shailendra Chabra. Shailendra, great to meet you in person.
Likewise.
I noticed that out of all the candidates, you basically sent me a bunch of email. You were checking out my network beforehand. You were kind of pre-positioning. I was impressed by that.
Well, thank you
and
very
you did
much.
it in a very kind of smart and aggressive, but high integrity way. So I like that. So as you know, I like people who are self-made. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your history and background for the audience to know.
I think I might get a little emotional. So I was born and raised in India. Growing up I didn't have a lot of money, so my father had a small business. He still has that business, and so I was sitting in a shop selling artificial jewelry and cosmetics, and I was very good at math, but I didn't know how to speak English. So my dad is a really good guy, has really high integrity, and people really like him. And so he had all these customers who would come and they would look at me, and I would do all this calculation in my head and tell them how much the total is. And they said, maybe you should have this kid get some education in English. And so my dad took a chance on me and took me to school, but a lot of schools rejected me. And so one school took a bet on me and labeled me as an experiment and said, okay, I will see if you can succeed or not. It took me like 3 or 4 years to attempt to speak English. A lot of kids made fun of me, but I knew that there's something bigger and there's a purpose for me. And so I made it. 4 years later, I scored highest marks in English in India.
In all of India?
Yeah. I got a merit certificate. It was like 95 out of 100. I got, along with that, I also scored like highest marks overall in all the subjects. And so a lot of great things started to happen. I started believing in myself, then I followed my path. Fast forward, I made it to IIT. I cleared IITJ in India. Then I came to US. Somebody gave me $600 to apply. I came to US, then it was like mind-blowing. Then I ended up working at Microsoft 5 years. Then I followed my heart, worked at a startup called Swipe. It was acquired.
And what did you do at Swipe?
I ran product management, marketing, user growth, as well as press relations. So I took Swipe actually and Crunchy's finals of 2011. Crunchy's in the best touch interface right here at TechCrunch. So I got acquired by Nuance last year for $102.5 million in cash. I worked at Nuance a little bit, but I followed my heart again. And right now I run product management, marketing, user growth, and press relations for a startup called Clipboard.
Which is a very exciting company. Why leave Clipboard to be an investor? Clipboard's a super exciting company.
I think it's a great company, and I'm fully, my heart and soul is in Clipboard. but I also think that sooner or later something great is going to happen to Clipboard because we have built a great product to allow you to save anything from the internet, and we're between Pinterest and Evernote on the landscape, and so things are going really well, and yeah, so I think being a venture capitalist is the next step in letting me share the skill set I've built over last few years at Microsoft, Swipe, and Clipboard to allow me to add value to a lot of entrepreneurs and create a better society that can change the world for good.
Okay, so a little bit off color here. What's your favorite movie and why?
My favorite movie is Good Will Hunting. It's because I feel the guy is so genuine. I can relate to the story because he was nobody, but he would solve all these problems at MIT. And it's interesting because I did give a talk at MIT in 2005, and Paul Graham invited me to speak at MIT Spam Conference based on some open source work I did. So I could relate to that a lot, and I think it's a great movie for people to see and share. And like when you do good things and surround yourself with great people, amazing things happen. And so.
Okay, so my final question is a little bit more complicated. I'm going to give you it's a multiple choice, or there's multiple questions, and just kind of answer what kind of pops into your head. The first thing is, this really concerns mortality, because all of us in this room have a limited lifespan.
Right.
If I told you you had 5 years to live, what would be your number one goal in those 5 years?
My number one goal in my life would be, I would say two things. One, spending time with my family and people I love and care for. And number two would be following my passion, make sure I do all the right things and set a framework for people to succeed and share my wealth of knowledge and wisdom with those people, including in the entrepreneurship, including in funding, like there's an organization I follow called Vitana to help people in third world succeed. So I would set the framework for that and spend enough time with my family and friends. And
okay, and how about if you only had 1 year? And it has to be a little bit shorter.
I would just compress that to 1 year.
How about if you had 24 hours? Let's suppose tomorrow the horrible news comes out that you died.
If I can't make to India in 24 hours, I would get on like video conferencing and share and express my love and passion and that I'm not gone. My memories are here and you guys are going to continue it forward. And I'm going to live through that. So, and I'll be happy and I'll share them with them that, hey, I'm not happy, don't be sad because I always follow my heart and I live my life to the full. So it's a good thing. We all have to recycle our soul at some point.
That's awesome. So thank you. Time for voting. You can stick around for the voting. It's more fun having you on the spot. Wow, some upbeat music now. Wow, pretty good, Shalindra. We will talk some more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, someone who captured my attention by being very creative, Tito Hamzy.
How you doing?
Tito, I pronounced that the right way?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, so why do you want to do this? I mean, I thought the video was fantastic.
Yeah?
It really was fantastic.
Thank you.
But you know, I haven't found that many cricket suit deals, so that one surprised me.
It's a bad idea.
It is a bad idea. So actually, let's talk about that. First, tell everyone kind of who you are and why you want to do this.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say thank you for letting me be here and everything. My name is Tito. I've been making videos and corporate videos for a lot of startups and tech companies in Silicon Valley, and just working on a bunch of different ideas that people have. So like projects that my friends might have or anything, they come and we'll talk about it and then we'll just work on it. I just like working on a bunch of different projects and figuring stuff out and getting the right people to make things happen. Hello?
We lost the mic here. Is yours still dead?
There we go.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. And so I've been doing that since high school. Actually, after high school, I traveled for a year, and I just explored the world and different cultures and stuff. And then after I came back, I just I took over my parents' legal process serving business, and I just did that for a while, and then I started a website because I wanted to get into concerts and stuff for free. So what I did was we started this site, and it was called Bob's Backstage Pass, and I would call different venues and stuff and be like, could we send someone from our team to come do a review for you? My name is Bob, and I'd give them like all these fake credentials and stuff. And then we'd show up at the venue and be like, yeah, Bob couldn't make it. I'm Tito. And I would just like go in, and I got tickets for like a bunch of my friends and stuff, and went on dates, and it was just good times. And they would give us like press passes and stuff. So we go backstage, and yeah, it was good times. And I just like working. I don't know how I got to that, but I just like working on projects basically, and making things happen.
I got that. Working on projects. Okay, so in terms of working on projects, how do you know whether a startup is a great project or not a great one? Like, how do you differentiate? And by the way, you may want to comment about the hair, like everyone's probably asking.
So the hair is just, I don't know. I feel like it's good for business, kind of, you know? If you're hanging out with a bunch of people and they all, I don't know, you want like something like very quick for people. Oh, the guy with the fro, you know? It's like right away. Back in the day, I used to have dreadlocks, so it was even crazier. I'd go into like these corporate meetings and be like, what the heck is a Rastafarian doing here?
That's good. You know how to get attention, but back to the question about how do you differentiate between what the great ideas are versus the not so great. Like, I thought the video was very clever in showing that you're paying attention to it.
Yes.
But when you get down in the details, like, how do you know from the beginning where to spend your attention? Look at the hallway here. There's tons of startups.
Yeah. For me, how I know a great idea is I kind of look at it the same way I look at a movie. A movie, it all starts with the story. The story is what's really going to drive a movie, like a big blockbuster or anything like that. And then you look at like maybe the actors, actresses, whatever. They're going to be like the management, the founders, and everything. But if someone has like a really strong idea, it's gonna. I just feel it works. Like all the movies, all the blockbusters have really, really good stories, and they work. So I feel like with startups and companies, if it's a really good idea and it's very simple for me to understand, it's like, it can't be too simple though, because a lot of ideas are like, they're not simple to start with, and you like don't understand it really. So I don't know, it has to be a good idea that I can grasp off the very beginning.
Got it. So which probably means you'll probably be more attracted to consumer mobile or consumer internet as opposed to the next generation of storage devices for the enterprise.
Actually, I've been working with a lot of enterprise companies like Cloudera and a bunch of companies. I have no idea what they do, but I mean, it sounds very interesting when they talk to me and their ideas and stuff.
That wasn't the best answer.
Sorry. I'm just constantly learning, you know?
Yes, I like that. So an important thing is like, a lot of founders are highly technical in nature, because this is the technology business, and they're going to ask, why am I going to take Tito seriously? Like, how are you going to sell into it? You're a very personable and super creative person. That's awesome. But what about you is going to allow people to say, I want to work with this guy?
What's going to allow people to work with me? So I like to, when I do get into a project or listen to a company or anything, I really like to take it all in and focus on everything. And actually, I actually go back home or wherever I am, and I do even more research. I constantly am reading, constantly just looking up what this whole thing is about. So if I get a little bit of information.
This whole thing being what?
Technology or whatever it is that they're trying to pitch me on or talk to me about.
What do you think is the most interesting startup right now?
Dropbox. Dropbox is still a startup? I'm pretty sure it is. I like Dropbox because it's really helped me with a bunch of different tasks. It's made something that usually takes a super long time to do, like send huge files, video files. It made everything so much simpler, and it just syncs everything up all over the place. It really cut down on travel time. You just send someone a video, and they have it right away.
Cool. One final question. How will you balance the U.S. budget?
That might be for someone else to do. I have no idea.
Okay, we're going to take some votes now. 1 to 5. suspense is building. Okay. Wow, a split view. It's interesting. Well, Tito, I want to thank you.
Thank you very
It's
much,
awesome to
man.
meet you.
Thanks.
Okay, so a couple things. We had 125 people apply. Only 4 women applied. Maybe women don't like me. I don't know. That was kind of a bit disappointing. There was 1 woman who applied. She was fantastic. She has a great job. She was nervous about the HR implications of her showing up on stage. She didn't pursue it. I was disappointed about that because I just thought she was great. So anyway, I wanted everyone to know that. Every one of these candidates that we invited up here, there was something really special about each person. There was something that I saw in each person. That's why I invited them. And they all have a lot of guts to get up here in front of a group and be judged by a group of people. So I really thank them for doing that. You know, yeah, I'm sure. Well, we'll talk about that later because we're out of time. This is really a real program. I am going to hire an apprentice. I'm not going to announce who I'm hiring tonight because I'm not ready to. My gut tells me I'm not ready to, but my gut tells me that there's 3 very interesting candidates that have real potential to work well with me, real potential to work well with my partners. I have 6 partners. Real potential to become a partner in the long term, real potential to work great with founders. And those 3 people I want to spend more time with and actually get to know better for real after this. I'm going to name them. Cameron Sapa, Sean Conway, and Shailendra Chabra. Those to me, I had a strong gut connection to, and I think the audience did as well. You know, I love Tito, man. You are awesome. And, but he didn't make the cut, and the reason why is I think you have an incredible amount of authenticity, but I would suggest that you go out and do a startup and build more founder credibility for yourself. Because I think you have a personality that could basically completely disrupt this business, and now you need to prove it out by founding something great. I really urge you to do that. I think that combination would make you fantastic. So that's about all I've got to say. I want to say thank you to everyone for being here and participating and letting me do this. And I want to thank TechCrunch for coming up with the idea. It wasn't my idea, it was Ned Desmond's idea, and thank you for listening to me for that opportunity. And I'm going to have Ned come back on the stage, and anyone that wants to write me afterwards, who also might want to apply, you should write me at George@CRV, because this search is not over. When it will be over, I will announce it through TechCrunch. Thank you.
Thanks, George. We'll go off this way. So everyone, if you could please put your voter back on your chair so that I don't have to pay for too many of them. So, thanks very much. Thanks for coming this evening, and hope to see you tomorrow. Don't forget to come to see who wins the battlefield. Good night.